If I close my eyes and think about that wonderful first year, the things that come quickly to mind, that were so wonderful, that I can almost feel, was standing on the boat, the dock in Stillwater, and seeing the people come down like it was right out of the movies. They would come down, the Showboat was coming, and of course the music was going, and the little children were running, and it all seemed, even if they didn't have pretty dresses, I visualized the pretty dresses and the balloons, and it just was going back to a wonderful period. Also having chicory coffee with the tugboat captains and their mates, which we kind of had to do on the sly, and sitting on the wheel in the sun with Joan Eastman and getting a suntan and listening to the river go by.
What you'd like to know is how this all got started. Actually, it began in 1956. There was some anticipation that we were going to need to have a Miss Centennial, Minnesota. We were going to latch on with the Miss Minnesota contest, and can't recall exactly how, but I got named a judge of the Miss Minnesota contest in 1956. And that's where, down in Albert Lea, I met Frank Whiting, the longtime director of the theater department at the university. And I can't remember the exact occasion, but sometime down there, he observed to me that his lifelong ambition was to have a showboat at the University of Minnesota that he could direct before he retired.
Doc was really a dominant personality at the department of those days. I'm sure you remember that. He was a wonderful man. I learned a lot from him. He had a 19th century sensibility that was unusual. At the time, I found him quite intimidating, but I look back on him with a great deal of fondness, and I understand now that I learned a lot from him.
Frank Whiting, gosh, what a wonderful man. But he said, I want a showboat. This would be my legacy, and I'd die happy. So we set out to find one. We found some boats, and one was too large, one too small, one too expensive to bring up here, and so forth. And well, ultimately, he came on the General John Newton, which was a U.S. Corps of Engineer boat that had been built in 1899, operated out of New Orleans as a hearing boat, and was now being declared surplus.
I was fortunate enough to be in the very first company of the Minnesota Centennial Showboat. That was in 1958. Some of us are still alive. And it was a wonderful experience.
First year we had it play in Stillwater. It was based, of course, at the Washington Flats, and St. Paul, Stillwater, Red Wing, Wabasha, and I think in Winona. And then subsequently that became too expensive to operate, and it stayed at its base in Washington Flats until such time, and I think it was 93 when it had to shut down because of the need for extensive renovations.
Unlike other disciplines, theater doesn't often have a workspace, a workplace, a training place. The Showboat, in effect, was our law review, was our medical internship. We did everything. The student had a great sense of responsibility. Plus, as with a law review or whatever, there was a sense of the honor to be chosen for the Showboat, and you had a sense of responsibility to the Showboat.
Life on board the boat was as interesting, I think, as doing the shows.
First time I was ever on the Showboat was as a student, just like tens and tens of thousands of other people, back in probably the early 70s. What I remember most about that first experience on the Showboat was the smell. Even before I remember how much fun it was also the charm of standing on the edge of the water at intermission and watching the Mississippi go by, and then going back into the theater again. It was somehow it didn't fully sink in that I was floating on the river until about halfway through the performance, and then I was aware from then on of the movement of the boat when barges would go by and ships would go by. It was really exceptional, and I think I fell in love with it then.
Well, the Showboat style that is preserved in the format that we use is actually the formula that was used on the showboats in the 19th century and even into the early 20th century, of doing a play, usually a contemporary play in the 19th century, a melodrama, and inserting musical numbers, song and dance numbers, in between the acts and scenes of the play for entertainment, and those are called the olios.
One of the features that has always been a great hit with our family has been the olios, which are so delightful, so memorable, so well done. It's just the very best.
The Showboat is an important feature because it is reflective of the originality of the theater scene here. It is something unlike something else. And I love that the theater scene has this diversity. The fact that you can go and see a show at the Showboat and be transported in a way to another time is just terrific. To see the intimacy of that wonderful space, just like there are other intimate venues, the McKnight Theater, Park Square Theater, the Jungle Theater, that it really makes theater vibrant and immediate. And I think that the Showboat has that immediacy as well as that incredible charm of reminding us of where we are, reminding us of the river, reminding us of the forebears in theater.
Actually, the issues that precipitated the Showboat tradition, looking in a different way, started, if my memory serves me correct, around 1990. The old Showboat had been neglected, and it had deteriorated. There were issues of dry rot just about everywhere. The university did an inventory of all of its facilities, and certain facilities were basically deemed as being inaccessible. And the Showboat was put on that list. Finally, we got a cease and desist order that said, we're stopped, we're done. You're not going to finish that. There was a big question about whether we should just walk away from the tradition.
I was approached by the department with their great concern that the Showboat was in such terrible shape that the university was threatening to close it down. If they couldn't come up with an extraordinary amount of money in order to repair the boat, that regular maintenance could no longer be afforded. It was going to have to be renovated or closed. And so we began a process that took ultimately about 11 years.
So the work on the Showboat began, the actual physical construction work began on the Showboat in October of 1999. The boat had sat in dry dock over at Upper River Services for about 3 years at that point.
I can remember going to the Board of Regents meeting, and we were thrilled, and they were thrilled to have it out of their hair because it had come up in front of them numerous times. The project started, and everything was set for a July 4th, 2000 opening. And so that's how that all started. We had our first auditions. For the first time, and I can't tell you how many years, I heard wafting out from below in Rarig, "Here comes the Showboat." And we had a big celebration. It was a Saturday night. We brought all the principals together, and we tried to bring as many people into this project as we could. And the next Thursday night, I was teaching a class, and I got notice that the boat had burned to the hull.
So one Thursday night, I was getting in my car and on my way to pick up some friends to take to the Guthrie that evening. And my phone rang, and I stopped and answered it just as I was going out the door. And it was Channel 5 News asking if I knew anything about a boat at such and such an address. And I didn't recognize the address, but it dawned on me they may have been talking about the Showboat in dry dock over in South St. Paul. And I said, well, I think you're referring to the Showboat. Why? And she said, well, are you aware that it's burning?
On the night of January 27th of 2000, Lance Brockman, myself, and David Bernstein from the University of Minnesota were in Rarig Center that night teaching a theater class. And it was Lance's turn to lecture that night. So he was at the front of the room, and I just remember sort of feeling that prickly at the back of my neck when you know that you're being watched. And I turned around and looked at the back of the classroom, and there stood Tom Troe, who at that time was our Director of Cultural and Community Affairs in the College of Liberal Arts, and he motioned for me to come out of the classroom. So I came out and I asked him what was up, and he said, "I don't know how else to tell you this, so I'm just going to say it. The Showboat has just burned down."
The truth of the matter is, I personally was, as chair of the department, was ready to walk away from it. I felt like we had pushed a very, very big rock up a very, very steep hill, and it had rolled down on us just as we were getting to the crest. I was ready for that position, and I was ready to convince the faculty that that's what we were going to do. Charles Nolte called me that morning, and he was absolutely devastated. And I said, "Well, it's over. I'm done. We just can't do anymore." And he said, "No," he says, "Lance, this is going to rise like a phoenix from the ashes." And that stuck with me.
There's no question in my mind that we owe a tremendous debt to Lance Brockman for, after the disaster of the fire, the phoenix rose from the ashes largely because of Lance and his marvelous way of getting it all together and making it happen.
One of the things that occurred immediately was that we did start looking around to see if there was a boat that was already constructed that would be easy to modestly re-outfit as a showboat. At that point in time, that's when the Paddleford Riverboat Company stepped forward. They had been involved sort of peripherally. They knew that we were going to be their new neighbors on Harriet Island. They had seen, of course, the building of the new dock, that we had met with them just to talk about how our two companies would work together. But they approached us after the fire and said, "What are you going to do?" And, of course, we said, "We have no idea." And their first comment was, "Let us help you. Either find a boat to buy and re-outfit or build a new boat." And so we took them up on the offer. Captain Bill Bowl, who was the owner and the president of the company at the time, along with his nephew, Steve Bowl, and the entire family who works for the Paddleford, were just so incredibly instrumental in helping us make those next steps.
The success of this entire enterprise, getting from the day the showboat was threatened with being closed to the day a new showboat pulled into St. Paul and 3 months later opened its doors for the first performance, was an enormous team effort. It was an extraordinary combination of people and good luck that pulled all this together. And I think there's a long list of people that if you took any one of them out of the mix, we might not have had the project.
You know, the other set of heroes are the folks who wouldn't let the showboat die the night of that fire. The folks at the university, folks like Lance Brockman and Tom Troe and Gene Montgomery and the central administration and the college, everyone came together, including our alumni, to say, this project's too important, we can't let it die. What do we need to do to push it forward?
Spending time on the showboat really gives you an idea of what working in the theater is going to be like. To be able to work on a project is really fun and a great way to get to know people that you wouldn't necessarily have met before, and to see how other people work and maybe eventually incorporate those things into your process. I know I've been really inspired by the people I've worked with on the boat.
You know, we talked about the importance of the showboat as being a nexus of community, a sort of place whereby the audience and the actors and the lovely sight on the river all kind of come together. They all intersect. And yet there's one thing I think that best demonstrates the ability of community to rise above the individual efforts, and that has to be the interior of this showboat. That the showboat, when it came upriver and arrived here April 17, 2002, the exterior of the boat was all finished. The interior of the boat was anything but finished. It primarily was wallboard, steel deck floors, and the walls had been painted. And that was the extent of it. There were no ceilings, there were absolutely no seats in the space, there was no lighting, and all of a variety of people came together. Tom Scott from Norcosco had given a generous donation of lighting. That's why we have a lighting equipment today. Students came out of the woodwork, both current and past, and they decorated the inside of the space, and they scenically painted it in that tradition. Mickey Henry, the technical director, spent hours attaching moldings and putting up all the detail that you see in here.
There was a great deal of enthusiasm in St. Paul about bringing the Showboat here and making it a part of our rejuvenation and revitalization of the riverfront. In some ways, our successes, the riverfront in St. Paul and the Showboat of the University of Minnesota, were one and the same and couldn't have happened but for together.
I think what's so special about the Showboat experience is that it's not just coming to see a play. There's so many other elements that surround it. It's coming to this beautiful destination in the middle of our capital city. You're in this wonderful park on arguably one of the world's most beautiful rivers. So you have this whole sense of place when you arrive here. As soon as you walk down the dock and into the boat, that sense of place turns into a sense of history, because now you're surrounded by this wonderful decor. You're immediately taken back into time, and the lobby and the surroundings just completely set you up for the kind of performance that you're going to see when you walk into the space. Again, it's that whole sense of event and experience that the Showboat offers that I think is incredibly unique and special, and that no one else can really provide.
So you come in this space and you're isolated, you're separated from the world, you're on the water, you're at the best vantage point. There's not a better vantage point of downtown St. Paul than right out there on that foredeck. And when you get done with this, the whole experience, the opportunity to arrive, to be greeted, to see a unique piece, to go out and have popcorn and pop, to stay afterwards, to see something out on the foredeck, the lights at night, or fireworks, or boats just going by during the day. That, for me, is what is unique about this boat.
My relationship with the Showboat, well, it's now gone on for 50 years. But every year, our whole family, up to 17, 20, come at least once a year as a group to take in the performance. That's my 4 kids, their spouses, my grandchildren, 7. A couple of them are away now, but that's something we never miss. It's a great delight.
The other thing about the Showboat is that the audience had an expectation. They did not want to see modern theater of the absurd. They were not interested in seeing the Pinner plays. They certainly did not appreciate any 4-letter words. The plays that they went to see were plays they knew they could watch comfortably with a 7-year-old child sitting next to them, and they could laugh heartily, and they could enjoy it.
I think the Showboat's repertoire plays to a wide audience, whether it's families with kids or a couple going on a first date.
The Showboat adds such vibrancy to the riverfront in downtown St. Paul. You know, now when you go to Harriet Island, it isn't just an island that is a gathering space and a lot of green space that is open, but you see people on the trails, you see people at the yacht club, you see people having picnics, fishing off of the public dock, going to events on the Showboat during the whole year. So you have people that are experiencing the island because they're coming to the Showboat, they're going to a reception, they are going to a show, or they're just on one side of the river and they say, what is that boat over there? I'm going to go check it out. And they can walk across the Wabasha Street Bridge, take some of the trails, and then just experience the Showboat. Also, when people come down and they go to a reception or go to a show, they don't just drive their car and park and run in to the Showboat and then hop back in their car and leave. It's been my experience when people come down, they take a moment and they do experience the river, and they take the time to walk up and down the river walk, or to go look at the Target stage, or even to check out the Wigington Pavilion, because they see this great opportunity, all these buildings, all of this life and energy, and they want to be part of it and they want to learn more.
One of the things that we've learned over time is that in rebuilding a city and revitalizing a riverfront, it isn't one single project. And you don't want to rely on one single project. What you want really is this combination of interesting things, big and small, but each that add to each other that make them better, so better than they are by themselves. So the Showboat, along with yacht club, and along with the paddleboat operation, along with the trails, along with the natural environment, it really creates this combination of things that make the river a great place. And communities that rely on one big project oftentimes find that it's not enough, that it isn't the kind of diversity that people are after. And the Showboat is a part of a very diverse experience on the waterfront that we wouldn't want to be without.
I guess if I were asked if I could sum up the Showboat experience in one word, first of all, that'd be very difficult. There are so many words that come to my mind. But I guess inspiration.
Summer.
It's fun.
Romanticism. Delightful.
Resilient.
Opportunity.
Drama.
Company.
Delightful.
Fun.
Collaborative.
Gift.
Optimism.
It's just the very best.